So you're going to your first major tournament and you're being required to fill out a deck list. Now, for a lot of players, this is something that is second nature. We've done this 1,000 times, but not everyone's done it all that much. And if you're a newer player, and there's been quite a few of them lately, you may have no idea what you're doing. So in this video, we're going to look at how to correctly fill out, that is, a Pokemon TCG tournament deck list. So something you would use to submit for a League Cup or a League Challenge or higher. So here we go. Let's begin. So first, why deck lists? Why even bother having them? The reason simply is this: they're required. Now, of course, there's a little bit more to it than that, but Pokemon requires deck lists for all premier events. Premier events are, of course, events that reward championship points. This is League Challenges, League Cups, special events, regional championships, international championships, and the World Championships. If deck lists are not being collected at a premier event that you are attending, I would strongly consider creating a support ticket at support.pokemon.com. They should be collecting deck lists, and they should be doing deck checks. Deck list submission helps tournament organizers ensure that players are playing the same 60 cards throughout the entirety of the tournament. That means they submitted a deck list and they are playing that deck list. It helps keep things fair. Deck list submission also helps tournament organizers verify that players are playing with legal cards during random deck checks. It seems crazy, but sometimes players don't do what they're supposed to. And this is a way to ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to. Sometimes it's human error, sometimes they just don't know, but this makes sure there is no second guessing it. And then if there are any other concerns, decklist submission also helps deal with that. If there's a decklist concern, we can fix it because we have a decklist. All right, so the overview for this is going to be what we're going to see in the video. We're going to learn how to fill out an official decklist by filling out the top matter. That's your player ID, your birthday, your name, all that stuff. We're going to kind of look at the anatomy of a Pokemon card so that we can figure out what pieces of information we need to fill out a decklist. And then we're going to go over some miscellany regarding deck lists, and we're going to look at one other way to create your deck list for an event. First, filling out a deck list. If you're at home, you can go to this URL and print off a deck list. So if you go to this URL, it'll go to the Play Pokemon Rules and Resources page. There's a whole bunch of different links for you there. The one you're looking for is one of these, depending on your area. Just choose the one that is correct for your size of paper. So if you are in an area that uses 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, use that. If you're in an area that uses A4, use that one. That'll get you your deck list. You can print that off, and we are going to look at this deck list. So we're going to look at the top matter first. Up first here, we kind of see all the different little things that are on the paper. The very first thing we're going to do is pick a format. Typically, we're going to be doing standard. So you'll put a check on standard, and we'll move on. Up next, you're going to want to put your name on the deck list because they need to know that it's yours for when they do deck checks. We'll put your name. In this case, our player that we're helping out is Ash Ketchum. He's only ever battled Pokemon. He's never played with cards before, so we're going to help him out here. So Ash Ketchum is putting his player name down, which is of course Ash Ketchum. And then next thing we're going to do is look for our player ID. If you don't have it memorized, and a lot of players don't, that's fine. You probably want to store it off somewhere on your phone or on some other device that you have with you, or maybe even just on a card in your wallet, because you're going to be using this a lot for Pokemon. Any major event you go to, any tournament you go to, they're going to ask for this player ID. So if you don't know where it is, or if you don't have one yet, that's fine. We're going to go to Pokemon.com and you're going to log in. This is assuming you have an account. If you don't, create one first, then join us afterward. Log into your Pokemon account, and you're going to see here, when you first log in, it'll go to your profile page. That is not quite the page you want, but you can get your player ID here too. It'll actually show up here on the top left where Ash Ketchum is, and it'll show the number right there. But if you're on a mobile device, you're probably not going to see that little box. So what you're going to do is you're going to scroll to Play Pokemon Settings. So Play Pokemon Settings opens up, and you'll see something similar to this. If you're on mobile, you'll just see the side of the right here, and you'll see your screen name. That's what shows up on Trading Card Game Live, and your player ID number. That player ID number is the number we're after here. For Ash Ketchum, that number is 1231234. So we're going to put that number. You can see I've circled it here. We're going to take that number and we're going to add it where it says player ID on the deck list. So now that we have our player ID, we're going to store that off on our phone for future use. And now we have it on this sheet as well. We're going to be turning this sheet into the organizer, and we're not going to be getting it back. Up next, we're going to talk about the rest of the top matter, which is your birthday and your age division. So for your birthday, you're of course going to put your actual birthday. So for Ash Ketchum, his birthday is going to be May 22nd of 1987. So he's going to write 5/22/1987. Pokemon requires players provide their date of birth and provide all of that so that Pokemon's tournament software can correctly divide tournament participants into age groups when pairing players. So if you're hesitant about your date of birth, just be aware that that's what it's for. It's to make sure that you're playing against people roughly your age. And then last but not least, we're going to do something that seems a little bit redundant, but it does matter for organizers' sakes. We're going to check the age division that you're part of. Down here on the list here, you'll see Juniors Division, you'll see Seniors Division, and you'll see Masters Division. So the years here, Junior, Senior, Masters, the years that divide each division will change year to year. So once it switches over, they may not quite match what you're seeing here on the screen. Just follow whatever it shows on the paper you've printed out. In this case, Ash has been born in 1987. So we're going to put Master's Division. Now that we've done that, let's look at the anatomy of a Pokemon card. Before we even begin looking at the cards, let's first sort all of our deck's cards into 3 different piles. So we'll sort it into Pokemon, trainer cards, and energy cards. And then once we get those 3 piles set up, we'll sort each card by name. So all of our Ultra Balls in one section, all of our Professor's Research in one, etc. So that we have all of our cards clustered together so they're all easier to spot, easier to pick out when we're creating our deck list. Now, part of the reason we're doing this, now that we've sorted all of the cards into our different groups, we need to be aware that for Pokemon, when we're writing them on our deck list, we need to be specific about which Pokemon card it is every time. This is because Pokemon may not necessarily have the same effects, attacks, etc. So you see this Ralts here is from Scarlet and Violet. It has an attack called Psy Shot and does 70 damage. But this Ralts here from Silver Tempest has an attack called Memory Skip. It's completely different. So our deck list will need to specify which Ralts that it is that we have in our deck. Here we have 3 different Ralts. All of them are different. So if we have each of these Ralts in our deck, we would need to list them separately. Here, let's look at Gardevoir, and we can kind of see the deck list we're building here on the right for Gardevoir. First up, let's look at the card name. So here we have the card name at the top, Gardevoir EX, understood. Next up, we have the regulation mark, G. We have the set information, so that's SVI, and this is the English version of that set. But the set abbreviation that we need to know is the large letters in that box, so SVI is what we'd be after. And then we have the collector number, in this case, 86. So when we're writing out our deck list here on the right for Ash Ketchum, we're gonna first look at the information that we need, so quantity, name, set, collector number, and regulation mark. And we're going to get each of those pieces of information from our deck and from the cards in them. So here, first things first, we will put 2 copies of Gardevoir because we're going to be running 2 copies of Gardevoir in our deck today. Ash is going to play Gardevoir. And then we're going to put those Gardevoir EX in the name slot. So 2 Gardevoir EX. The set we've already established is Scarlet and Violet base set, or SVI, which is the abbreviation. We're going to be putting the abbreviation because Scarlet and Violet base set is pretty long. So SVI, that's in that little box there again. And then here, the collector number is 86. So we'll put 86 in the collection box. And then the last little bit here is the regulation mark G. Something to be aware of when you are writing card names is to make sure to spell them correctly. And that goes for capitalization too. I know a lot of content creators, for example, might capitalize the E and the X in this name, but if you put that on your deck list, it is technically wrong and a very strict judge may penalize you for it. So be aware of that, because there is a such thing as Gardevoir EX with capital E and capital X. So again, spell it correctly, spell it out all the way. Up next, we're going to look at this Luminion V. We're looking at this Luminion V because sets prior to Scarlet and Violet base set don't have that convenient little box that have the abbreviation in them. They have what I lovingly refer to as a set hieroglyph or a set symbol. Basically, we have to look at this symbol and look it up to figure out what abbreviation we need to use for the set on our deck list. So we see this little arc-like symbol on the bottom left here for Luminion V. We will look this up on the left side of our deck list page, and we'll see that it falls here in the Sword and Shield series, and we find it right here. BRS is the abbreviation for that particular set. That's Brilliant Stars. So on our deck list, we would write BRS for the set abbreviation. Now, it's very important that if we have different arts, even if they're the same Pokemon functionally in our deck, that we list them out separately so that we have the correct information on our deck list. Now, we just looked at Luminion and we saw that that one was from Brilliant Stars. However, these 2 Luminion, one of them is from Brilliant Stars, but it has different artwork and it has a different collector number. And you'll see the one on the left here has a different symbol altogether. That one is not from Brilliant Stars, it's from Crown Zenith. And if we were to have this Luminion V in our deck list, we would write instead CRZ. We would need to make sure that we're putting the correct one in our list. And if we have mixed arts, we need to list them separately. If we have what would otherwise be identical cards that have a different set abbreviation or a different collector number, we need to write them out separately on our deck list. So if we have 1 copy of this Luminion, we would put 1 Luminion V, CRZ, GG39. CRZ is the abbreviation for Crown Zenith. And then if we had the Luminion on the right, also on a separate line, we would also write 1 Luminion V, BRS 156. BRS, of course, being the abbreviation for Brilliant Stars. They would need to be listed on separate lines. Now, just because there's different art for these Pokemon doesn't necessarily mean that that's always going to be an issue. Sometimes the art isn't what makes the difference. You'll see here we have 2 different Rotom V. Now, despite the art being the same, despite the attacks, ability being the same, everything is the same about this card. But if we're going to pay close attention here, you'll see on the left and the right, they have different set symbols. We've got to keep an eye on that. One is from Lost Origin, LOR, and the other is from Crown Zenith. So we need to make sure that we're putting the correct one on our deck list. If we have one of each, then we need to list them separately on separate lines because they are different. Now, of course, separate sets, they have a separate collector number. So we need to put the correct collector number for each of the cards. So for each of these cards, for example, Rotom V LOR 58 and Rotom V CRZ 45. Again, different cards with different numbers and different set abbreviations. We need to make sure that if we have one of each in our deck, we list them separately on different lines. And then finally, we're going to look at a card here. This is Blacephalon. You'll see we do have most of the information we're used to seeing on these cards. So we see the Blacephalon up top. There's the name. We see a set symbol. Okay, our friendly hieroglyphs are back. We do see a collector number, but you'll notice there's no regulation mark. So cards before Sword and Shield don't have regulation marks. That's fine on cards like these. So for Blacephalon, if we had to use this for an expanded deck list, for example, we would just leave its regulation mark empty. Up next, we have trainer cards to deal with. Trainer cards are nice. And the reason trainer cards are nice is because we don't need to put nearly as much information about each of them. So with trainer cards, and this is also true of energy cards, it is not necessary to specify which version we're using. We could use 4 different ones and we'd still just put 4 of whatever. So let's say we had 4 Ultra Ball and they were all different arts, maybe one from Roaring Skies, one from Brilliant Stars, one from Sun and Moon base set, and one from Scarlet and Violet base set. Cool, whatever. Despite them being different arts, despite them being completely fancy and different, we would just put 4 Ultra Ball and be done with it. That's it. So if it has the same name and is legal in the format we're playing it in, it does the same thing, even if the text is worded a bit differently. So you see Ultra Ball here. This is that Scarlet and Violet print I was talking about. Here we have the Brilliant Stars one. These two worded the same. And then we see a slightly older version of Ultra Ball. This one from Sun and Moon base set, worded a little bit differently, but the effect is identical. So in these cases, if we had these 3 Ultra Ball in our deck, we just put 3 Ultra Ball. If we had a 4th one, no matter what art, 4 Ultra Ball. Done. And you can kind of see that here. Just look at the box. This is straight off of that deck list sheet. So you see here, it doesn't ask for anything except the quantity and the name. You see on that little blank space there where it would ask for the number and the set and the regulation mark. It doesn't ask for that. It doesn't want it. It doesn't need it. Don't bother with it. Same goes for the energy cards, right? That space is empty. We're not going to bother with it. It's done. So if we have a card like Boss's Orders, for example, we need just the name and the quantity of the card, and that is it. So for Boss's Orders is the name of the card. Now, you'll see on the right here, it says Getsis, because that's the character featured on this art. Do not write that on the card. That is not part of the name. That is flavor text. It is functionally unimportant for our deck list. So we're just going to put Boss's Orders. So here, we're going to run 4 copies of Boss's Orders because we're very greedy. So we'll put 4 for our quantity there. You see it pop up. And we're going to put the card name Boss's Orders, and that's it. Done. That's all. That is literally all we need for trainer cards and for energy cards. We need the name and then how many of them we have, and that's it. Now, another thing that's very important is to not shorten or abbreviate any card names in your deck list. In Standard, currently, there is a card called Colress's Experiment. Very popular card, especially in Lost decks, right? Colress's Experiment is a card. Now, you might mistakenly think that if you put 4 Colress on your deck list, that's perfectly fine because a tournament organizer is going to know what you're talking about. Don't do that. Do not take shortcuts like this. The organizer may feel that they understand your deck list and may be lenient, but there is a very high likelihood that they will penalize you for it and force you to replace any of those cards that would be illegal or don't match what's in your deck with basic energy cards. And there's a very high chance you'll just get a game loss for that. Don't do it. Especially because if you do shorten card names, sometimes that shortened card name is a different card that actually exists. So if you put Colress on your deck list, that could be this Colress and would be illegal in the format you're trying to play. So your tournament organizer or judge in general would rightfully assume that you're trying to play this Colress in your deck and would have to issue a penalty for it and would probably force you to swap it out with basic energy. So don't take shortcuts when you're writing card names out. Spell them correctly and write them all the way out. The card's name is Colress's Experiment. So write Colress's Experiment. Just to refresh, trainer cards, we only need the name and the quantity. The same is exactly true also of our energy. So if we're running 2 copies of Reversal Energy, we would put 2 and Reversal Energy, and we're done. All right, so for some extra little things just to be aware of and kind of hammer home a couple things real quick. Decklist miscellanea. Write neatly, write clearly, write carefully. Do not guess at set abbreviations. If you don't know it, look it up. I have seen players put a card on their deck lists and assuming that the abbreviation for Brilliant Stars is BST and putting it on their deck list instead of looking it up. The problem is the abbreviation for Brilliant Stars is BRS. BST is Battle Styles. So if you have the wrong set abbreviation, that can cause problems with your deck list when you're being deck checked. Check the set abbreviation. Do not guess. If you are not 100% certain, look it up. It's on that deck list sheet. Just check it. And even if you think you're certain, at the end, go back through and double check it anyway, just to make certain. Again, Don't shorten, don't abbreviate card names, write them out, but don't write flavor text. It's boss's orders, not boss's orders gets us, just boss's order. And then, as I kind of already hinted at, check your list for accuracy before submitting it. I cannot emphasize this enough. Double check that your deck and your deck list both have 60 cards. Count them separately. Count the deck, count the deck list, double check that you have 60 in each of them. And then when you have confirmed that you have 60, go through everything in the order that you have it on your deck list. Make sure that all of those cards are exactly what you say on your deck list. That does matter. You run out of room when you're writing your deck list. Write on the back of the piece of paper. The deck list sheet is only on the front. So if you run out of room for the Pokemon or for the trainers, or even for the energy, put a little note on the side, said more on back, and just keep writing on the back. Put in the same information that would be required of you on the front. Don't skip out on stuff, but just fill it out the rest of the way on the back. And then this is something from an organizer's perspective that makes things easier for everyone involved and is less stressful for you. If you are able to fill out your deck list prior to coming to the tournament, do so. Have it completely filled out and ready so that all you have to do is walk in with your receipt or whatever your organizer is requiring for payment and your deck list and just turn them in and be done with it. It's less stress for you, it's less stress for the organizer, and it helps keep the tournament organizer able to run things quickly, smoothly, and on time. Something to be aware of is that some tournaments, and this includes basically every regional and international championships, may very well require that deck lists are submitted in advance, and they may need to be submitted digitally. We're going to look at another option for printing out your deck list that can also be used and will likely be used for you to submit your deck list for a regional or international championships, or also for some special events. So that option is rk9.gg. So you may recognize rk9.gg as the site that most major events use for tournament registration. And this is important because not only do you just register for the tournament there, you also submit your deck list there. But, and some players don't realize this, you can create deck lists on there and then use them just to print them out. You don't have to submit them for a major tournament. You can print them via RK9 for a smaller tournament, like a League Cup or a League Challenge. So if you go to rk9.gg, you can click on Deck List Creator and start adding cards to your deck list. So for each card you add to your deck list, you'll need to type the name of the card to search for it. And just like with printed deck lists, the specific print of the Pokemon you add to your deck list does matter. Do not forget that. Add the correct one. For trainer cards, simply add the correct number of the card by name. So if you have 4 copies of Nest Ball, add 4 Nest Ball. It's not going to try to remember which version you put in. It'll say 4 Nest. So if we're running 4 copies of the Nest Ball from Sun Moon base set, which doesn't even appear in this list, that's fine. It's still legal. We just put 4 copies of whichever art we prefer, and we'll move on to the next card. So we'll just put it all in. Whatever trainers are legal in, or whatever trainers show up in this list, we'll just use those as long as they match the name of the card that's in our deck. So again, 4 Nest Ball from Sun Moon base set, we just put them in 4 Nest Ball of either of the ones here, and the 4 Nest Balls are in our deck list. Another thing that's worth noting is you can import your deck list from TCGL, so Trading Card Game Live, but be especially careful that when you are importing a deck list from TCG Live, that the prints of the Pokemon that you're using in your live deck are the same as the ones that you're using in your physical deck. You may have really fancy art on TCG Live, but are using a more mundane or base art in real life. And if it's different when you import to what you actually have physically, that could cause problems when you get deck checked. So double check that any cards that it imports actually match what you're using in real life. Again, this only matters for Pokemon. For trainers and energies, is not going to matter because we don't have to include all that extra data that we do for Pokemon. But for Pokemon, it's vitally important that it matches exactly what is in your deck. Don't get penalized because your physical and digital decks use different arts. So once we have all of the cards added to our deck lists, we can save it, and it might look something like this. So this is a deck list here on RK9. There's a little button here in the middle in yellow that says print, and we would click that to bring up a page to help ourselves print. But if we're submitting this deck list for a major tournament like a regional, we would instead hit the green button, which is submit, to make sure that we're submitting it to the tournament that we're going to be playing in. But if we do hit print, you'll see that it brings up this page here, and we can use the print function in our web browser to print out our deck list all nice and pretty on a sheet of paper so that we can have it ready to go for the tournament that we're joining in, whether that's a challenge or a cup, and kind of have a stress-free time because our deck list is ready to go before we even show up. I hope that this video was helpful for you. If you have never filled out a deck list, I know it can be a little stressful, especially if you're trying to do it in a hurry. Now that you've kind of gotten a primer on filling out a deck list for your Now that you've gotten a bit of a primer on filling out your deck list for a tournament, I hope that you have a great time at whatever tournament it is that you're joining in. And as always, stay happy, stay healthy. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.